right, welcome. We are glad you're here and took an hour of your time with us. I'm Alyssa DeFilippo. I manage a program called Connections California at Parents Helping Parents. And okay, so today, if you're here to hear about how will the regional center support my loved one after I'm gone, certainly a topic top of brain for a lot of us here today. You're at the right place. And today I am so thrilled to welcome back to the PHP Connections California screen, Trudy Grable, who to many of you probably needs no introduction. But if you are new to our Parents Helping Parents events, Trudy Grable spent 30 years at PHP, supported and trained thousands of parents and professionals, developed programs, built communities, was part of the PHP leadership. She is a trained, credentialed person-centered planner with the Learning Community for Person-Centered Practices. And her passion for this subject matter is rooted in her life's experience and her compassion for others on similar journeys. So Trudy will be our host today, and she has Rudy in the background just in case she needs support. And she will be introducing our presenters. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Gabriel, for being here. And I'm going
I've
to stop
answered
my
to
share.
worse, Alyssa. So I just want to thank Mike for pulling together a team of people who are going to address the biggest concern that I always hear from families. And it doesn't matter if your child's 5, 15, or 50. This is the concern that all of us share as parents of somebody who relies on supports in order to have a life and a good life, hopefully. And so I want to introduce and thank Mike Keeley for being willing to do this with us today to help kind of dispel some of the myths that people may have about what Regional Center actually does, how they really kick into action when we're no longer around. And I've seen service coordinators step in and really just embrace the person, make sure that things are done well, that they are safe. And sometimes it's an emergency basis. It's not going to be the perfect situation, but rest assured that they're there to really step in and help. And I've worked with Julie recently on a person who I know personally who has a serious health condition, and they've just been amazing. The whole regional center really wrapped around the person has no living parents and a sister who lives out of state. So I've just seen them all go into action to make sure that things are really happening. So we invited Mike, who is the Director of Consumer Services at San Andreas Regional Center. But if you're in a different regional center, it's a statewide program. And Mike has been there at times when I've been in crisis with my own child to help me get the supports that I needed, as well as just, I always think he's the kindest man, and just a really great advocate for our kids. And I say kids because if you're a parent, they're always your kids, right? All right, no further ado, give you to Mike.
Thanks, Trudy. Wow, that was some introduction. Really, really appreciate it. Uh, I am Mike Keeley from San Andreas Regional Center, the Director of Consumer Services. I tend to speak quickly, so I'm going to try not to speak so quickly so our translation can follow me. But as Trudy said, I've been with San Andreas for 30 years. And before that, I did a variety of different things, always involving involving people with developmental disabilities. I was a behavior consultant for the regional center. I worked as a manager of a group home for kids, a manager of a group home for adults. I worked in Special Olympics. I even was a behavior therapist in Early Start. So I did all these sprinklings of things before I came to San Andreas 30 years ago. And what we're going to do is talk about how do you care for someone after you're not around anymore. And it's kind of a heavy topic, an emotional topic. And what we're going to do is different San Andreas people are going to take different segments of this, because there are lots of pieces that we wanted to go through. And we wanted to cover this maybe for about 35 or 40 minutes and then give you guys the opportunity to ask us questions, because it's about you and it's about your family and what we can do to support you. There, at the end, Trudy will talk about a link where you can get different information, because there's always going to be more questions as we go. So before we get started, I'm going to turn this over to people to introduce themselves from the Regional Center side. As Trudy said, San Andreas is one of 21 different regional centers in California. And people are really lucky in California because it's the only place where people with developmental disabilities are entitled to get services to help them live in the community. Other states don't have that, but California does. So to introduce themselves, I'm going to start by turning it over to Kate.
Hi, everybody. Happy to be here. Good to see you all. I'm Kate. I work at San Andreas Regional Center, and I am in a very fortunate position that I get to talk about information and training, which is why I am here with you all today. I'm going to leave it at that, and I'll pass it off to Lisa.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all. My name is Lisa Hartley, and I'm one of the Associate Directors of Consumer Services. At this time, I oversee the Santa Cruz and the Monterey regions, and I also oversee our self-determination program. And like Mike, I've been in the regional center system a very long time, over 20 years, and worked as a direct care provider as well, and seen it from many different angles. And this is actually a topic that's a little bit near and dear to me, because it's one that came up a lot when I was a service coordinator. And I always love to talk about ways we can support the families. So happy to be here. And with that, I'm going to pass it on here to Julie.
Hi, hello, everybody. This is Julie Lucier. I'm the Health Services Coordinator here at San Andreas Regional Center. We're a team of 9 nurses to supervise everybody. In that team, I also have a occupational therapist and someone that can do referral for dentals. During the time that we are going to be together, we'll be mostly talking about advanced directive, POLST, and what other mechanism is in place for the San Andreas Regional Center to take care of your loved one if you're no longer there to do so.
Great.
And
thank you, Julie, Lisa, Kate. Let me give you a little overview. We're going to talk a little bit about planning ahead, what that looks like, a couple of steps in the planning process. Then I'm going to pass it over to Lisa, who's going to talk about the decision-making options that are available to people, things like conservatorship, supported decision-making, that sort of stuff. Then Julie is going to talk about medical planning. Kate is going to talk about all the money stuff, financial planning. And then I'll talk about some of the living options or placement options, because those are questions that families often have. And then we'll wrap things up and then have time for your questions. So let's go to the planning ahead part. We want to plan ahead when we can, but there are options for every stage. Sometimes things become unexpected. And I've worked with families where maybe things in the world took a turn. We really experienced that a lot during COVID, where families weren't used to people getting sick and having to stay at home and not being able to go out and get food, and really had to go back to what social work was really about, where we were really helping people directly. And I think during that time, people really started to think a little bit more about, I need to be a little bit more prepared sometimes. I really need to plan ahead. So looking at different options is important. And that's one reason why we're going through this. So there are different steps when you're looking at planning. Different things you want to do to kind of organize your thoughts and make sure that you're getting everything set up the best you can. You want to identify any concerns like that your child might have, health, behavior, service concerns. You want to look at the important things to know about your loved one. You want to look at what the life plan goals are. Look at future decision makers. For example, if you're not around anymore, who might help out making decisions? Who do you trust that would support your son or daughter? Look at financial resources. This is a big question that a lot of people have because there are different options that are out there. Some of them are limited depending on how much money a person has, and some of them are more liberal in terms of how much money you can have. So people often have questions about money. Looking at the cost of life care, what's needed to make that a reality, preparing a will, living trust, other documents that have to do with the estate. Sometimes even when you have a child with disabilities, how would that affect the person if you're leaving them in the will? Would that affect their resources? Would that affect their Social Security? You know, kind of looking at things like that. Establishing any special needs trust or ABLE accounts, which we're going to talk about. And then after you've got all of that stuff written down, then review it and adjust it. Because usually there's a thing or two they say, oh, you know, I forgot this piece of it. So it's kind of like a little fire drill. Just important to put those things down, put your thoughts down on paper. You may have a lot of that in your mind already, but it's a good idea to start the steps so that you've got everything kind of laid out for you. Overview of things to consider. These are general services that you might want to think of that are around for everybody. In-home support services is something that people can use. Probably a lot of you already have this, but people use that in order to support someone at home. It was originally designed for people that had dementia, and it expanded to people with developmental disabilities. Looking at Social Security, that's available to almost anybody that has a disability and isn't able to work. Medi-Cal, Medicare, and insurance to help cover the health costs. Different generic things like that. Generic services means services that are available to the public and not just regional center specific things. Other things, services that are around, we're going to talk about what sort of housing options might be available, whether someone wants to live in a residential care facility or their own home. Looking at maybe respite support, supported living, or independent living services. Looking at how somebody can integrate into the community and socialize, because having those connections is super, super important. The other thing we want to talk about is making decisions, whether you go a more legal process, which is conservatorship, whether you do something that is not legal but can be very influential, like supported decision making. Some people want a power of attorney. And then looking at some money things, like setting up a special needs trust or a CalAble account. How retirement can impact Social Security, looking at siblings and their finances, and looking at healthcare plans. Julie's going to talk a lot about that. And then end of life planning. So those are some things when you're making this whole list of how do I organize my thoughts? This is kind of overwhelming. These categories can kind of help you out.
Okay,
I'll turn it over to Lisa now.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the next step when it comes to decision making. I know a lot of times families will ask, should my loved one be conserved? What should I do next? I hear this a lot, especially when people are, turn 18 and they're entering adulthood. We talk a lot about, do I need a conservatorship? What is supported decision making? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Okay, thank you. Okay, so when we're talking about decision making, we kind of want to start to think about who can help my loved one and who can support my loved one. So that can look a lot like, could it be family members? It could be siblings. It could be aunts, uncles, cousins. It can also be friends sometimes. And also a little bit about who knows my loved one well, right? Because we don't want people making decisions decisions for our loved ones that we don't maybe trust or we don't feel that have this person's best interest at heart. So we want to look at, who do I feel safe with? Who do I feel safe to make those decisions? Who has the capacity to take on making those decisions for my loved ones? Does my loved one require support with decisions? And this is a really big one when we talk about conservatorships, because when we and we'll get a little bit more into that, but we want to make sure, does my loved one need someone to make decisions, or can they just get a little guidance, but they can actually make decisions on their own? Or does my loved one require someone to assist by making those decisions? And what are my concerns with how they will access their needs? Okay, so that's some of the starting questions that we like to ask when we start to think about that. So speaking about conservatorships, the conservatorship that we most are involved with the Regional Center is the limited conservatorship. And this is a court proceeding wherein a judge gives a responsible person, a conservator, certain rights to care for someone, in this case with developmental disabilities. So we often have families ask, is this something I should do? How do I go about this? And this really is a decision for you. We can give guidance. We like to give guidance and we can give resources, but it's really a decision for the family to make as to whether or not, and the individual, if a conservatorship is right for the individual. The powers that are usually awarded for a conservatorship are the ability for the conservator to fix a residence, and that would be like help that person decide, or decide for that person where they're going to live, whether it be in a care home or living independently with supports. Or another one is accessing records. So the ability for a person not to be able to necessarily to access all their own records, but have somebody access for them on behalf of them, right? That can include things like medical records, for example. It gives a conservator the ability to enter into contracts on behalf of another person, withhold and give medical consent for medical procedures, decide on education or different types of developmental services. And also the next two are a little controversial: exercise control for social and sexual relationships, and also consent or withhold consent to marry. We often, have conservatorship. We'll talk a little bit more about conservator petitions that come to the Regional Center. But the last two powers, exercising control for social and sexual relationships and consent for marriage, we don't see those powers being requested often, or they're requested, they're not always given. They do take away somebody's rights to have like meaningful relationship in the community, or have someone decide for them. So we don't see those as much, especially not as much anymore. But these are all the powers that somebody could request if they were trying to be a conservator for one of their loved one. Okay. Okay, thank you. So in a conservatorship, what does a conservator do? A conservator acts in the best interest of the conservatee, helps the conservatee develop maximum self-reliance, can stop or abuse or neglect, ensure that the individual has housing, healthcare, education, transportation, personal care, food, and clothing. And a lot of times for our individuals, that can look a lot like a conservator will help somebody find the right housing, because maybe this individual, their loved one, may not make the best choices around that. So they would help them find something that was suitable. Or maybe they needed a medical procedure and that it was in their best interest to get it, but they felt scared to get that, or they felt they wouldn't necessarily make the decision to get that, but it was necessary for their health and well-being, or for them it could be something that was life-threatening. So they needed a medical procedure that could help them be healthy, and so that could be another thing. So all of these different areas that a conservatorship could help with. So the conservatorship process, what does that look like? It starts with gathering required documents. So you would be required to gather documents, file those forms with the court. This is a petition. You're petitioning for a conservatorship, notifying required parties. So usually all required parties, including the Regional Center, are notified in the case of a conservatorship. There's also an assessment process for the conservatorship, where the court investigator will contact parties and say, I'd like to find out if you're making recommendations. And that can be for the Regional Center will receive that recommendation request. Oftentimes our service coordinators help to write those letters. to make those recommendations for the conservatorship. And then there's a proposed court date where you would talk about this in front of a judge, and this is reviewed in a court hearing. So that's how that typically happens. There's different ways that people go about getting assistance to petition for a conservatorship. Lots of times, and this isn't all included here, but some of the resources people can use a lawyer for that too. A lot of times people will use an attorney that deals with estate planning. Sometimes individuals can use paralegals even. I've seen that before. It's not as costly. Oftentimes people will go to their self-help center or use family resource centers to get guidance on that, and even some assistance to do it themselves, because you can do it yourself. There's also educational webinars and seminars, peer centers, and legal counsel paid. Well, she already put that down there. I didn't see that one. Yeah, so you could pay for, like I said, a lawyer. But it's good to just go to your self-help center or contact an estate attorney for a consultation just to get information and also to ask questions. That's always a good first step to learn about the conservatorship process. Okay, and this supported decision making. So what is supported decision making? A system of support created around the individual with a disability. Let me close this up here. To empower them to be able to make informed decisions independently with their chosen supports. So supported decision making is different than a conservatorship because the person is able to make decisions on their own. They're not appointing someone, or somebody's not asking to be appointed to make decisions on that person's behalf. Oftentimes with a conservatorship, those decisions are made without the input of the individual. So supported decision making is more a collaboration with the person and the person they've chosen to guide them and help them make these decisions. It's less restrictive and allows that person a lot more independence in the decision-making process. So one type of a supported decision-making is power of attorney, which is a legally binding process. It's a little bit different than someone just choosing a supported decision maker because it's a legal process and involves legal documentation, and it is usually honored by, most any agency or like a bank or a doctor, any of those particular entities, but it's not a conservatorship, right? A little different than that. Representative payee role is a very good example of a type of decision making where for the regional center can be appointed to be a representative payee for our individuals we serve, and individuals can choose for the regional center to do that. And that's a type of supported decision making. I'm having a hard time getting supported decision making out. I think I want to say SDM. So SDM, agreements and formal documents. So there can be documents that are created by the individual and whomever they choose to be their supported decision maker. And so that could be drafted between them, formal documents. And these agreements and documents can be notarized too. Another thing is that the supported decision maker, the individual and their supported decision maker can establish like principles, right? Principles or tenets, so to speak, of what they want their supported decision making to look like. And anybody can be appointed to be a supported decision maker, provided that person is somebody that person trusts. And they know that this person's going to work in move in their best interest and act in their best interest. So that can be anybody, a family member, a friend, an advocate. So, and then also we can also have service coordinators, or service coordinators can write into the IPP what are the terms of the supported decision making. That's also can be a part of your IPP process. Okay. Okay, and one tool that is available is something called the life course. I know there's lots of things like this online that help you kind of chart your life course, and I think it's really it's a tool that helps people ask those questions to guide them as to whether or not they feel like somebody might need full support to make decisions, like they would not be able to make any decisions on their own, or they can make some choices, but they really need somebody to make more like comprehensive choices that affect their their overall well-being, or somebody who might say, you know what, I can make most of these choices on my own, but I would like somebody to just kind of run things by. And we all do that, right? We all have somebody that we can we count on to answer questions for us or help guide us or problem solve with us. So this is kind of like one of the many tools available that helps people make those decisions by asking certain relevant questions to help guide you. Do I need to pursue a conservatorship because my loved one needs support with many different areas, and I don't believe they could make any of these decisions on their own, or if they did, they might use judgment that could put them in harm's way, or would be a health and safety issue, or can my loved one really make most decisions? They just need a little guidance. Or there could be a situation they don't need any support, really. They are making those decisions, and maybe they're not even interested in either of those two options. So this is a tool that allows you to explore all of that. Okay, I'm going to pass this on to Julie.
Hi, everybody. Julie Lucier, Health Services Coordinator. Do you want to change the next position? So here's a little bit of the topics that most of the times family will ask. What is the health concern? Does my loved one, do you have one? Do we have an appropriate insurance in place? Do we require any medical services? What are the long-term plans for my loved one, like a post and advance directives and things like that? And what are the desired funeral arrangement we want for your loved ones? Those are all big questions in reality, and a lot of people don't necessarily feel comfortable approaching them correctly. For ourselves, so even harder for our loved ones, right? Medical to consider. It's essential to have frequent doctor, dentist, mental health visit. Yes, of course. They are the specialist in your loved ones in the decision making. They will also be guiding you on, okay, we're moving slowly towards more chronic, more critical needs, and then they can be helping you. Having an insurance, well, depending on the program that you have, normally our clients are normally under managed Medi-Cal. Depending on the area where you live, there's a few choices, and others are only one choice. So if you're in Santa Cruz or San Benito and Monterey County, you will only have one choice. It's California Alliance. But if you're in the Santa Clara County, you will have multiple choices to decide what would be your insurance, and we can work with you to explain those options. Your service coordinator also can be participating in that. We want to consider the need for services, right? Therapy, treatment, rehabilitation, different placement of living, an ICF, a skilled nursing facility, which is SNF, is the skilled nursing facility. Would they be okay to get a surgery or not? A feeding tubes, tracheostomy, being on a ventilator, all of those questions comes up on a regular basis, and we have to face them different ways. It depends on what was the person in their essence and what is the belief of the family or the support in place presently, and also the medical side of what is to be considered as a long medical issue that a person can live with. So there's a few things that can happen. If any of you have been in the hospital recently, you will see that they're always asking, do you have an advance directive? What is an advance directive? It's basically a legal document. It has to be notarized most of the time to be effectively recognized by the law. It is helping a person to decide and understand the choices that they have, and also to appoint a healthcare agent. A little bit like what Lisa was saying, except that person cannot be a paid staff. It has to be a person that you rely on, a family member, a friend, a person that the family and the person has a relationship and trust, because that person is in the future, when you have a future crisis, will be the one taking decision on your behalf. So there has to be some sort of a relationship and a good bond that understands what and what not the person wants. And that's exactly what's happening right now, is that a person that has an advance directive needs to understand what they're saying. They need to understand what are their choices, and they need to understand what are they saying that they want to have. So it's not for all of our clients. Not everybody can actually be able to understand, even in the simplest way possible, the repercussions of certain choices that they will make for their lifelong decision. They may not also be able to understand what's right and what's wrong. So those advance directives would not be good for the person to complete. Some do have a level of understanding, but those documents that the hospital are giving us are way too elevated for them to understand. There is other documents that we have, and one of that here at San Andreas, and it's made for people with intellectual disability, is the Think Ahead booklet. It is available, and it's basically an advance directive, but written in a very simple language that person with intellectual disability or low capacity because of the chronicity of their disease may understand easily, and they can do the same thing. They're naming people who will be, if they can no longer speak, who will be taking their decision, what do they believe regarding medical advanced ventilator, resuscitation, surgical with permanent implants, like a G-tube or a pump or different things, or a tracheostomy so that they can continue breathing. Those are, and then they can also push into the funeral, what they want to do and who wants to distribute their belongings to. If they have an apartment and they have different belongings, they can also do that in the advance directive. Family can work with the person in completing these if they can be understanding. But the person, like I said earlier, needs to have some sort of a capacity and demonstrating their understanding of what they're saying yes to or no to. It's not just a paper that you sign and you go to notary. And that would be giving you. So it is in future crisis. Next page. Now we have a pulse. So what is a pulse? Basically, it's a portable medical order that it can be easily accessible for anyone coming in from 911, calling in and telling them exactly what to do. It is a physician order. It is not, it needs to have two signatures, either the person or the person responsible for that person, and a doctor has to be signed it in order to be actionable and followed through medical 911 or hospitalization. It should have a conversation with your physician and the rest of the team at SARC so that we are all on the same page. So we are all working together. And it covers, what if my heart stops? So the section A would be, do we want to restart the heart? The section B is for medical intervention. That means intubation, tubes going from the mouth all the way to the lungs to keep the person breathing in a certain way. You could have, that would be the full treatment. Then you can have selective treatment, meaning you can get oxygen and everything else except having an intubation. That means that we're not going to do anything invasive. Comfort-focused treatment means that we're just going to address symptoms. So a person living in a residential care facility or with you, is difficult to get that unless they're at the point to be on hospice. So normally we will see that focus treatment, comfort focus treatment only once they're really at the end of their life and getting into hospice or palliative treatments, that they can actually manage those symptoms. And the third part that we don't see on this one is the artificial feeding. It's the part C, and that's another very important part that you need to talk with your families and think, if you weren't able to eat anymore by mouth, even though you're very loving your Burger King and your hamburgers, McDonald's, and going to your coffee shop and getting everything, if you weren't able to do that, would you like to have a tube that feeds you through your stomach, your abdomen, and then feed you through there? That means nothing else going back in the mouth anymore. It's just through that tube that you would get feeding. That's an important conversation to have, even for all of us right now, because we never know when it happens. So the minute that a person does have or start having chronicity, with normally if you're on the regional centers, you're already having some significant changes in your health that could be considered, it would be good to have a pulsed. So advanced directive is for future crisis. Pulsed reflects what is on the advanced directive, doesn't go against the advanced directive, but it is a physician order. So it's an immediate treatment that they can address with specialty.
Julie, can I ask you to talk about how regional center might act on the healthcare of the person? Because
it's coming from the next slide.
We're down to 20 minutes.
I'm almost done. We're good to go with that one.
Okay.
Thank you. So burial plan, if you're doing any changes, that would be something to start thinking about. Planning ahead of you, different payments of options to place that. Next one after. So you're having, okay, so you didn't have that one on the slide. So basically, if none of that, if POST is not in place, if your advanced directive cannot be done, what happens if your person is now no longer family members to decide? San Andreas Regional Center does a goals of care, or what we call internal bioethics here. So we will connect with your family members who are there available and wishing to be part of it. We will have the physician attending. If he is in a residential care facility or any SLS or supported staff is available, they will be part of it. And we think outside the box a little bit for what's going on with this person. What can we do to make sure that this person has access to treatment? We advocate for the doctors to give more treatment, or at one point, if there's no longer options, then we advocate for palliative end-of-life support, hospice, and making sure that everything is very human. There's no pain, and comfort is the seeking part of it. So we do have that regularly. Even if you are the conservators, you can be attending and asking us to help you with that, because that's what we do. That's what the nurses here do. We advocate for services, and sometimes having difficulty communicating with the medical field, it's helpful for us to step in and help you to support that decision. It also helps us when we know what is the goal, what is the family wishing and not, so that we can actually continue. If this is later on and you're no longer here to help us, we are continuing what the family had stated as their wishes. And that's how we basically advocate for the life of the person, treatment plans and placement. If nothing works anymore and we need to change them and there's no other family members, we can even evaluate where would be the next placement options for this person.
Great. Now, Kate, well, if you can do this in about 3 or 4 minutes, because I want to get to, I've seen a lot of the Q&A questions, so I'm going to try to answer them in my next segment. So hold tight, folks, and then we'll keep going. Just a few minutes, Kate, because we're running out of time. I know we've given you guys a lot of information here. It could be kind of overwhelming. So we'll move forward.
Fantastic. Okay, so quick overview on financial planning. And once we move into Q&A, I will also drop in an opportunity we have later today on actually financial planning. So if you want to hear more about it, we have an opportunity at 2. But just getting into some of the options, we want to consider what our current assets are, as well as some of the options available specific to the community that we're working with, people with disabilities. We're really fortunate to have access to accounts that are built specifically for our loved ones that help to protect their government assets and also let us plan for the future. So you're really familiar with working with Social Security, making sure these things are in place. You also want to consider what your assets are because that can impact what their future will be. And we're going to look at some of these other things as well. So one of the pathways that we have are something called SNTs or special needs trusts. These are legal accounts that allow somebody to help manage assets or plan in advance for an individual to set aside those funds so that they can continue forward and be cared for after we're no longer here. One of the main benefits with these accounts is that it can help to protect some of the government benefits, so making sure that we still get our SSI every single month and make sure that doesn't impact any other services. Although there are definitely guidelines for how to invest. It does help because there is also a trustee to help manage these accounts and who can help to work with the individual and manage their funds. There's a couple different kinds of trusts that are available. There's a first party where it's funded by the person's own assets, inheritance, or settlements. There's also a third party, which is funded by contributions from family members, loved ones, grandparents. And then lastly, there's an option for pooled trusts where usually managed by a specialist. Many people can contribute their funds to a pooled trust so that a trustee can manage it and help to work with investments. These pooled trusts are often used with individuals who maybe have lesser dollar amounts that they're working with. Some things to think about is you don't distribute the funds directly to the person. It's made for payments of their services. It's usually for things beyond basic care, so equipment, therapy, rehab, travel. You can use this for burial expenses, but it will not fund rent, handing out cash, gift card, taxes, or utilities. And I think I have one more. Yes. And ABLE accounts. So on to a completely different type of option that we have. We also have access to ABLE accounts, which are tax advantage savings and investment accounts built specifically for people with disabilities. And it's really exciting to see that they're expanding the parameters of this year after year. So it's nice to always check every year what the current allotments are. As of right now, you can contribute up to $19,000 a year, up to $100,000 total lifetime to set aside funds for somebody to continue forward for anything that they might need. Education, housing, healthcare, things that benefit the person's well-being. This is protected, so as long as we're staying within the contribution limits, we're not impacting anything like our monthly SSI. I'll pass by this. We've covered a lot of these things already so that we can move forward into Mike's session.
Okay. So, a lot of the questions that have been coming up are if I'm not around, is the regional center going to step in and take care of my child? It seems like that's what a lot of people were talking about in the chat. And it's important to remember, oh, you skipped to the end here, Kate. It's important to remember that the regional center is like a big brokerage house. So the social workers and even the nurses and dental care, me, Kate, Lisa, we don't go out and do the work directly with your son or daughter. We contract it out with other people. We try to connect families with resources that are already out there. That's the primary thing that we do. There's one exception to that, where we do make decisions. We have the ability to make the decisions, and that's if there is a medical condition that happens and the person's unconserved, let's say, and they're in the hospital, we can't get a hold of anybody, and they can't make a decision about some sort of procedure that they need because maybe they're unconscious or something like that. The regional center has the legal ability to make medical decisions for people in those circumstances. The other group of questions that seemed to come up were, there were lots of questions about conservatorship, which I'll try to get to some of those, but some of them had to do with, well, can I get support 24/7 in the home? Or if I'm moving to this new program called self-determination, can I get that sort of support? And there are many families that need that. Now, 24 hours, 7 days a week support can look different. It could be paid support, it could be natural supports, it could be a combination of things. So you really need to talk to your service coordinator and have a planning team meeting to figure out what sort of supports you need. As far as self-determination goes, that should be, the services you get through self-determination should be based on your needs, just like in the traditional services. The difference with self-determination is that you have a budget and you can hire somebody that is a vendor or a qualified non-vendor. But the IPP process and the services should be the same. There shouldn't be necessarily less services or more services just because you go into self-determination. It may open up who your providers are. You may have more options that way, but the services are based the same way on the IPP based on the person's needs. There are also lots of questions about conservatorship. If can I add somebody to the conservatorship, or what happens if I'm the only person on there and I pass away? It's common for people to have a co-conservator on the conservatorship. And it's recommended, especially if people are getting older or think that they might not be able to do the job anymore. So co-conservators are very, very common. There were some questions about taking off a co-conservator, that people might want to be the only person making the decision. And that's a legal process that people would have to go through. So I covered some of the questions. Let me go through the last bit here in just a couple of minutes.
I'm not seeing slides. It said, are you all seeing the slides?
It says planning ahead, step 1.
I'm not seeing them. Could somebody in the audience in chat let us know?
Oh, there's a thumbs up.
Okay, it's just me then.
Okay.
Could you clarify too, before we close, what is it that Regional Center does
What do we do
when we're dead? Like,
okay.
like rep payee. Will they deal with medical issues?
Sure.
The real practical stuff that we do all the time, you know, and quarterly for some things, annually for others. Is that something we can expect you guys to help with when we're unable?
We can be the rep payee. We can have an account set up and we can distribute funds and things like that. That's pretty common. Many of the individuals that we work with don't have family members that are around, because our people with disabilities are living longer and longer, which is a good thing. But as they live longer and longer, their friends and family may not be around as long as they are. So if there's a situation like that, what the Regional Center tends to do is make sure that all of the support systems are stable. They might not go out there and provide the respite. They might not go out there and provide the supported living, but they can make sure that those things exist to support the individual. They can make sure that the housing is stable. They could connect with legal authorities if there's problems with housing issues. They can make sure that the finances are stable. They can work with teams to look at their health situation. As you know, Trudy, sometimes what we'll do is maybe a provider isn't doing what we think they should be doing. And that's when we'll get together and say, you know what, we expect you to do this. And we're going to step in here. We're not going to do the work, but we're going to tell you what we think you need to do that hasn't been getting done. And making sure that safety is a priority. So even though we don't do the direct care, many times what we do is we will get together with the people that are doing the direct care and say, this isn't working, or this needs to change now. We've had folks where their house is burned down, and we've said, we need to get together and find you some affordable housing and get you food, clothing, shelter, and make sure that we're recreating your life again now that you've gone through this. That's the sort of things that we do. We're not going to take the place of a family. We shouldn't take the place of a family, but it doesn't mean that we can't get together to make sure that the systems out there are working together to support your son and daughter to give them the best life possible. That's what we do. There are very, very rare circumstances where the regional center will be the conservator, just a handful of people. We don't like to do that because it's really, it could be a conflict of interest if a big agency is saying, this is what you're going to do in your life, and this is how we're going to provide the support for you. It's better not to do it that way. We do that for people that have gone through some very unusual circumstances where maybe they weren't treated well by other people and there was nobody to treat them well, and somebody needed to step in. Okay, next slide, Kate. Well, again, the end of life's decisions should not be made at the end of life. The planning is so important to get this taken care of, to make sure that you've got a plan in place. And now we've got about 10 minutes, or actually a little less, to maybe Trudy or whoever was monitoring the Q&A to see if there are some questions that we haven't covered either in our slides or in my brief kind of closing.
Yeah, there are lots of questions, but as promised, I would like if everybody could just take a look at the chat to see the links to the evaluations, one in English, one in Spanish. If you can click on that, give us some answers and give us, you know, close to 300 responses in 6 minutes. That would be wonderful. All right. Thanks, everybody.
You might need
Trudy?
to do those, put those links in again, because there's so much. Or
Will
did
do.
you?
Will do.
Okay, great. And
So,
there's a lot of questions about benefits and Social Security, housing, dealing with housing
yeah,
situations.
housing. We have a couple of things that we do. We have housing choices, which helps get people set up with affordable housing, helps get them on lotteries, helps even find the housing for them, and then can sometimes even have a support person that can help the individual with their landlord to be like a liaison. We also have Bay Area Housing Corporation, which helps make sure that housing is separate from the provider in many circumstances, because sometimes a provider will say, I'm going to go out of business, and we don't want a person to lose their home. Because that happens, we want the individual to stay in their home, but we may need to get another provider for them. So those are some of the housing things that we have.
So here's a question that comes up a lot. How often do people who are in care, like a residential care home or supported living, parents are gone, how often does the regional center check in with those folks?
We need to check in with them quarterly. So we go to their house at least quarterly to make sure that everything's going okay. That's a requirement.
Thank you. There are
lots of questions. Maybe we should have just done a Q&A sort of session, or we could do a follow-up if you would like.
Well, let's do a follow-up.
Let's do a follow-up. Let's do that.
That's great.
I
there is one question that's kind of my bailiwick is what will SARC honor a person-centered plan written by a conservator parent before passing away? The person is unable to manage their own affairs.
Well, what an interesting question. So there's a person-centered plan that theoretically the person-centered plan was written with the person there and maybe a support team. So it's not just dictated by one person. So If it's put together, Trudy does some great trainings on person-centered planning. If it's put together in a way that where the person was the center of their world, then of course we would honor that. Yeah, very important tool. Each regional center is a little different. I saw some questions saying my regional centers said this. Generally, the principles are the same. So, but it's like it's like Kaiser. Most Kaisers operate under the same principles, but each Kaiser might be a little bit different. That's the way I would explain regional centers.
And there are lots of questions on conservatorship, but there's also a couple on supported decision making. So folks are just wondering when is the best time to start that process and how would be a good beginning.
Yeah, and I think that, 18 is the magic number, isn't it? Where somebody becomes an adult, but it doesn't mean that you can't, because when people are under 18, the parents or legal guardians are the people that make the decisions at that point. A lot of people, you can't really start the legal process of conservatorship, and that can't be established until someone is over 18. But you can start thinking about things. You can start thinking about supported decision making and how you're going to go about doing that, maybe ahead of time. However, I will say that many times, think of the term supported decision making. It's really helping a person make decisions for themselves. And most of the time, if you've got a good relationship with your son or daughter, you work in partnership with them. Now, what gets tricky about that is if you're not around anymore, then who's going to take over and who's going to support your son and daughter? And a lot of the questions, had to do with that. And I think that's why it's really important to expand the circle of support that a person has.
I'm going to ask one more question. This will be the final question. It'll be answered by Mike.
Oh, uh-oh.
I don't have, and I'm just speaking as if I'm somebody who has not had the time or the funds to do all this preparation. And I walk out across the street and boom, I'm gone. What's going to happen to my child?
Well, when something like that happens, the regional center will get together, and we have unfortunately encountered things like that. Mm-hmm. And we, first of all, reach out to that person's family, friends, whoever we can find, first of all, to get their input, because a family is number one. If that person doesn't have any family, then we get a team of people together to say, these are the sorts of supports that this person is going to need. This person doesn't have their mom anymore. They don't, this person who relied on their family for their whole lives now doesn't have that. And how are we going to put some supports together? We would get a team together, including the service coordinator, the manager, whether we need nursing teams, our financial team, in order to support that person as much as we can. Lisa, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to add something. Oftentimes what we find is that the individuals had support from different agencies with people that they've had for many, many years often, and that person will usually weigh in too. And sometimes that person goes to actually help them. It could be a REST provider, it could be a PA, it could be a supported living agency. We do find that their circle of support is all of the providers that have been helping them. And they usually do become a part of that discussion and planning too, in some ways too.
I will tell you this, the regional center can't take the place of your family. But if you have the regional center, you're not alone. We are able to step in there and help you out. Okay?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to end on. And if I just might say that a lot of these questions are kind of better suited for an attorney or a financial planner or somebody whose profession is not with the regional center, because the regional center does what they do, and financial planners and financial special needs attorneys, they do what they do. And the event that is coming today at 2:00 with financial planners, go to that. You'll probably get some of your questions answered. Look at the PHP Connections California calendar. April and May are full of presentations on financial planning and legal aspects. The point about building a community of support for your loved one is very well taken, Mike. We appreciate that. And we also appreciate you saying that maybe you'd come back and do more of a Q&A. It could sort of be maybe a part 2.
Right.
But I would just ask that if Mike and the entourage they do come back, that we keep the questions about regional centers and not about necessarily special needs trusts and
Sure.
financial planning.
There are so many things, so many little pieces that people are afraid that they're going to miss.
And I also think you don't know what you don't know sometimes, right? So sometimes when we start processing this, it's okay if it comes to us, because when we start processing it, we're like, oh yeah, actually,
that's right.
I've encountered this. Let me help you.
Yeah.
So that's okay too.
For the people who are still here, I'm going to share a link that I mentioned earlier in the process here. But it has an overview of all the things that you should be looking at, with links to getting more information about it. And this was put together, a lot of the resources came from families who have used this information that we've compiled. It's on my website under Caregiver Resources, Caregiver Supports. And I call this my exit strategy, because we all know we're going to exit one of these days. It has a lot of categories. You can jump to it. These are things that you may not have known were available. And there's lists about conservatorship, special needs trust, assessments for who can take over when I'm not here. So all kinds of stuff. And I'm going to stop there, because we are out of time.
Yeah.
Could I add one?
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry. I love resources. I want to add one more reference. Caring Futures, and I'll add the link, provides trainings that you can sign up for. They're free, they're accessible, they help you build plans to get much more into the nitty-gritty of all these conversations. So that's another reference that I'd like to direct everyone to, and I'll get the link for the chat.
All right. And maybe we'll have a follow-up with lots of Q&A for you guys. It sounds like there were lots of questions here, and really appreciate that we were able to join you on this rainy Tuesday.
Yeah, thank you so much. I thank Kate and Julie and Lisa and Mike and certainly Trudy for bringing this to us. I thank Teresa, who was helping with the Spanish translation. Sorry we didn't get to everybody's questions. Did anybody really think we were going to get to everybody's questions? Even if we have a Q&A, we're not going to get to everybody's questions. But just please remember that we are very lucky living in California that we even have a regional center system. So we need to be grateful for that, and we need to just be grateful for that. And so we thank everybody who spends their time and their energy working for the regional center. We know that you have huge caseloads, and you're not doing this to retire to the south of France. So thank you everyone for coming.
Send the chat with all the links.
Tomorrow with the slides and all the links will go to everybody who's attended, not everybody who's registered, but we had quite a bunch attend. And then also the video of this will be in the PHP video library within 2 to 3 weeks. Now, if we end up doing a Q&A session, maybe we'll record it, maybe we won't, maybe it'll be more of a discussion. I'm not sure yet. We'll talk about that with Trudy and Mike. All right, so thank you everyone for coming. We really appreciate your time. Sorry we're 6 minutes late, and sorry about the snafu at the beginning. Okay, take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.